Imagine a country where gods and humans share the same space, where ancient temples rise before the world's highest mountains. A place that, at first glance, seems like a spiritual sanctuary, but hides a darker side that few dare to reveal. Nepal, the land of Mount Everest and Buddhism, is often marketed as a mystical and peaceful destination. But is this peace real? What tourists don't see are the deep-rooted problems plaguing Nepalese society. The country is one of the poorest in Asia, and behind the image of meditating monks and breathtaking landscapes lies a system where corruption runs rampant, where poverty forces thousands to leave their homes in search of a better life, and where the government often turns a blind eye to the exploitation of its people. Here, thousands of Nepalese are deceived by false promises of work abroad, only to end up trapped in modern-day slavery schemes in the Middle East and Southeast Asia. Meanwhile, within Nepal itself, inequality has reached alarming levels. The tourism industry, which generates billions, rarely benefits the country's poorest citizens. Who truly profits from the climbers who pay fortunes to scale Everest? Who controls the money that flows through the Himalayan trekking routes? But to understand how Nepal reached this point, we first need to look at its geography and how its position between two global giants has shaped its fate. Nepal's climate varies drastically depending on altitude. While the southern plains can reach temperatures above 40 degrees Celsius in summer, the northern mountains experience freezing temperatures all year round. This extreme variation gives Nepal a unique biodiversity, with tropical forests, glacial rivers, and rare species like the snow leopard and the Indian rhinoceros. But Nepal's geography doesn't just shape its natural environment. It deeply affects the lives of its people. The rugged terrain makes infrastructure a major challenge. Many villages are completely isolated, lacking roads or access to basic services. During winter and monsoon seasons, landslides and avalanches frequently destroy roads, cutting off entire communities and making life even more difficult for the population. And when it comes to geopolitics, Nepal finds itself in a dangerous crossroads. India and China are constantly competing for influence, forcing Nepal's leaders to balance delicate diplomatic decisions. Pleasing one side often means provoking the other. This constant struggle has turned Nepal into a real-life chessboard in the power dynamics between two of the world's largest nations. But to understand how Nepal became what it is today, a land of rich culture but immense challenges, we need to go back in time and explore its history, from the earliest kingdoms to the modern-day conflicts that still shape its people's lives. Nepal's history is as grand as the mountains that surround it. For centuries, this land was the stage for battles, political intrigues, and the rise of powerful dynasties. What we now know as Nepal was not always a single nation. In the past, this region was divided into multiple independent kingdoms, each ruled by kings who fought over territory and influence. It all began thousands of years ago, when the first people settled in Nepal's fertile valleys. Influenced by the cultures of India and Tibet, the country became an important religious and commercial hub. It was here that Siddhartha Gautama was born, the prince who would later be known as Buddha, the founder of Buddhism. But ironically, modern-day Nepal is predominantly Hindu, with nearly 80% of the population practicing Hinduism and only a small percentage following Buddhism. In the 18th century, a military leader named Prithvi Narayan Shah unified Nepal's smaller kingdoms and founded the Kingdom of Nepal. It was an impressive but also brutal achievement. He conquered cities by force and imposed his rule with an iron fist. This new kingdom resisted British invasion attempts, as Britain controlled India at the time, but eventually, Nepal was forced to sign treaties that limited its sovereignty. Throughout most of the 19th and 20th centuries, Nepal remained isolated from the rest of the world, ruled by an absolute monarchy that governed the country as its private property. But everything changed in 1951, when the monarchy was forced to adopt a constitutional system. However, political instability continued, and in the following decades, the country experienced coups, protests, and brutal repression. The most shocking moment in Nepal's recent history occurred in 2001, when King Birendra and almost the entire royal family were assassinated inside the palace. The main suspect? Crown Prince Dipendra himself, who allegedly killed his entire family before taking his own life. The massacre shook the country to its core and remained shrouded in mystery, with many conspiracy theories about what really happened that night. After the massacre, King Gyanendra took the throne, but his attempt to restore absolute monarchy led to massive public revolts. In 2008, the monarchy was abolished, and Nepal became a republic. However, democracy brought new challenges: unstable governments, rampant corruption, and a fragile economy. Even so, Nepal is trying to reinvent itself, mainly through tourism. Every year, thousands of travelers from around the world come seeking adventure, spirituality, and, of course, the chance to climb Everest. But does this industry truly benefit the Nepalese people? Or is tourism just another cog in a system that privileges a few while exploiting many? Let's find out. Nepal sells itself to the world as a spiritual and adventure paradise. And while the country does offer some of the most breathtaking landscapes on Earth, along with experiences far beyond conventional tourism, is everything really as perfect as it seems? The biggest attraction, without a doubt, is Mount Everest, the highest mountain in the world. Every year, hundreds of climbers spend small fortunes trying to reach the top of the world. The problem? This obsession with Everest has created chaos. Once a symbol of perseverance, the mountain is now overcrowded, littered with waste, and facing a rising death toll. The Nepalese government continues to issue more and more climbing permits, despite knowing that many climbers lack the experience needed. The result? Traffic jams in the death zone, frozen bodies scattered along the route, and an Everest that is slowly turning into an open-air graveyard. But Nepal is more than just Everest. The capital, Kathmandu, is a vibrant city filled with temples, palaces, and chaotic markets. The Kathmandu Valley, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is home to stunning landmarks like Durbar Square and Swayambinath Temple, also known as the Monkey Temple. However, the city still bears the scars of the devastating 2015 earthquake, which destroyed thousands of historic buildings and left millions of Nepalese homeless. For those seeking spirituality, Nepal is one of the most popular destinations in the world. The city of Lumbini, the birthplace of Buddha, is a sacred pilgrimage site. Meanwhile, Pokhara, with its serene lake and Himalayan views, attracts travelers looking for meditation and yoga retreats. But behind this atmosphere of peace, there's a multi-million-dollar industry of spirituality for tourists, where many pay small fortunes for so-called authentic experiences that have actually been commercialized and adapted to Western tastes. And while tourism does create jobs and boost the economy, it does not benefit everyone. The industry is controlled by a handful of wealthy families, while many workers, especially the Sherpas, risk their lives carrying massive loads for Everest expeditions, all for minimal wages. In a country where inequality is staggering, tourism has failed to become a true driver of development. Instead, it has only widened the gap between the rich and the poor. But if Nepal's economy doesn't rely solely on tourism, how do Nepalese people really live? What is the cost of living in one of Asia's poorest countries? Let's find out. Nepal is one of the poorest countries in Asia, and its economy reflects this harsh reality. Although tourism brings in billions of dollars each year, the vast majority of the population never sees that money. The truth is that Nepal's economy is largely sustained by something few people talk about: the modern-day slavery of its citizens working abroad. Currently, around 30% of Nepal's GDP comes from remittances sent by Nepalese workers overseas, mainly in the Middle East, Malaysia, and India. Millions of young Nepalese leave their homes to take on dangerous, exhausting jobs, often in inhumane conditions. In countries like Qatar and the UAE, many fall into exploitation and forced labor, left without documents and stripped of any labor rights. There are countless reports of Nepalese workers dying from exhaustion on massive construction projects for events like the World Cup, while their families back home barely survive on the little money they can send back. Inside Nepal itself, the situation isn't much better. The average salary for a worker is around 15,000 to 20,000 Nepalese rupees per month, $110 to $150. Meanwhile, basic living costs are high by local standards. Renting a simple apartment in Kathmandu can cost between 10,000 and 30,000 rupees, $75 to $225, while feeding an average family requires at least 20,000 rupees, $150 per month. In other words, local wages barely cover basic expenses, forcing many to seek opportunities abroad. Nepal's fragile infrastructure is another major obstacle to economic growth. Power outages are frequent, poorly maintained roads make transportation difficult, and corruption prevents investments from reaching the areas that need them most. The 2015 earthquake, which devastated the country, only worsened these challenges. Reconstruction has been slow, plagued by embezzlement and unfinished projects. The government has been trying to attract foreign investors, particularly from China and India, but this puts Nepal in a vulnerable position. The country must carefully choose its allies, as one wrong move could upset one of the powerful neighbors that surround it. And Nepal has learned throughout history that being caught in the middle of geopolitical disputes can be extremely dangerous. But Nepal's economic problems go beyond poverty. The country also struggles with high levels of corruption, gender inequality, and a fragile political system that often stalls any attempt at progress. And when we take a closer look at Nepal's darkest side, we uncover even deeper issues, from human trafficking to political persecution and caste-based discrimination. Let's explore this hidden reality. Behind the spiritual and peaceful image that Nepal projects to the world lies a system filled with injustice, corruption, and extreme inequality. The country still bears the scars of its feudal past, with a caste system, officially abolished but still deeply rooted, determines who has rights and who is condemned to misery from birth. The Dalits, also known as untouchables, are at the bottom of Nepalese society and continue to face brutal discrimination. Many are banned from entering temples, forbidden from using the same water sources as higher castes, and in practical terms, denied access to decent jobs. Even though laws exist to combat this segregation, prejudice is so deeply ingrained that thousands of Nepalese still live as second-class citizens. But Nepal's problems go beyond inequality. The country is one of the world's main hubs for human trafficking. Every year, thousands of Nepalese women and children are trafficked to India, Malaysia, and the Middle East, where they are forced into brothels, illegal factories, or domestic servitude without rights. Most victims never return. Even worse, there are reports that government officials and police officers turn a blind eye or even profit from this black market. On top of that, freedom of expression in Nepal is far from guaranteed. Journalists and activists who expose corruption or government abuses often face threats, arbitrary arrests, and, in some cases, mysterious disappearances. Nepal's political system, marked by decades of instability, allows corrupt leaders to come and go without ever addressing the country's real problems. And as if that weren't enough, Nepal is also caught in the growing influence battle between foreign powers. China and India compete for control, funding infrastructure projects and influencing political decisions. Meanwhile, the Nepalese people find themselves trapped in this power struggle, uncertain whether their country's future will be decided by their own leaders or by external interests. But is there hope for Nepal? Can a country so rich in culture and natural beauty overcome its darkest challenges and build a better future? That's what we'll explore in the conclusion. Nepal is a country of extremes. On one hand, it boasts a fascinating culture, breathtaking landscapes, and a resilient people. On the other, it struggles with corruption, inequality, and a system that keeps millions trapped in a cycle of poverty and exploitation. But is there a different future for this nation? The truth is, Nepal has the potential to grow. But to do so, it must break free from the problems that have haunted it for centuries. Tourism can be a powerful tool to boost the economy, but it needs to be managed fairly, benefiting the entire population rather than just an elite few. Additionally, The country must invest in education and infrastructure to reduce its reliance on remittances from abroad and create opportunities within its own borders. Despite all the challenges, there are signs of change. A new generation of Nepalese people is more connected to the world than ever before, demanding rights and fighting for a fairer country. If their voices gain strength, Nepal may finally stop being a stage for exploitation and corruption and become a true example of resilience and progress. The road ahead won't be easy, but one thing is certain. Nepal is not just an exotic destination for tourists. It's a country with a rich history and a future still being written. And the question remains, can this nation transform its natural and cultural wealth into real progress for its people? Only time will tell.